There's a new warning that the geopolitical situation, partly involving the conflict between Russia and Ukraine and our intense load shedding, is going to pose huge risks to our economy over the next year. This is particularly because we have an open economy which sells commodities. In other words, what happens on international markets has a huge impact on us, and there's really very little we can do to influence those events. Volker van Widdern is the head of strategic risk practice at Riskonet Africa. Volker, good afternoon to you. How big are these risks to our economy?
Good afternoon, Stephen, and to your viewers. They're significant, and we've had some benefits as well. We know that we've had the benefit of the commodity boom over particularly 2 years ago and last year, so that certainly helped reduce our deficit. But at the same time, if there's a decline in the growth or the demand factors in China, all of a sudden the demand factors and the prices of the major commodities go down. So then you get a double effect. The volume goes down and the price goes down. So the level of revenue declines quickly, and that's what happens in an open economy.
We can't control what happens in China. We can't control geopolitical events. We can't control the price of coal, even though the price of coal is very high at the moment, which is good for us. We can't control the price of oil, which is also very high at the moment, which is bad for us. Can we prepare for these things, though?
Yes, again, I wouldn't say we give, financial analysis advice, but when one's doing these kind of things and you have a commodity-related input cost, there are things like financial hedges where you can buy forward at a particular price. If one reads the Sasol annual report, you'll see a lot of commentary about hedging the oil price, both purchased and sold. So people are trying to control the major input prices as well as the export prices. So from a major corporate point of view, it is possible to hedge your input costs and your sales prices using financial instruments. As a country, it's probably more difficult to do so, but certainly in the context of avoiding major shocks to your system, one can hedge out prices at least for 6 or 12 months.
The one thing we can control, well, the one thing we're supposed to be able to control is load shedding. But I don't know if anyone can control our electricity system at the moment. Volker, I'm sure you've experienced that yourself. So can people do anything about that? How big a risk is that to our economy? Let me put it like that. I imagine
that is the biggest risk.
Yeah, biggest risk, yes.
And the risk is that we haven't executed. So our position, and as difficult as it is, we would sort of hold corporate clients' feet to the fire, as it were, to say, look, if you worried about load shedding 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago, why have you not done anything about it concretely now? You can moan about somebody else, but perhaps there's a way you could have collaborated with your neighbor or with your industrial node or brought some more power in a different way so that you could have used the last 2 or 4 or 6 years to at least mitigate elements of load shedding internally. And I think that kind of thinking is really urgent now. The problem is not going to be fixed with a central agency from all the evidence that we've seen. Yet there's massive amount of investment available. Trillions of rands are available for investment just for South Africa, which are being held back because of the uncertainty of the climate. Why not deal with the uncertainty by having corporates being able to generate their own electricity, raise their level of productivity and profits, and get a return on their own electrical investments? So it is possible to address that risk.
We talk about electricity, we talk about load shedding, but the other thing is just generally infrastructure. So, for example, railway infrastructure is a major problem. We see water problems all the time. We report on the communities that have those problems. Companies have those problems. Are you worried generally about infrastructure in South Africa?
Very much so. We know that, and again from reports, that the actual tonnage carriage on the Richards Bay line is more than 20% below its ideal factor. We know about clients who are allocated a certain tonnage in the year and they don't get close to that tonnage in terms of allocation, and they switch to road. That has the double whammy impact of a significant erosion of margin because of the higher cost, and our road infrastructure is further damaged. So again, if you looked at that, and I'm being very broad here, but imagine if the railway line from XYZ, from Gauteng to Richards Bay, was broken into 100-kilometer segments, and those 100-kilometer segments were auctioned off to clubs of corporates who all had a very strong interest in that railway line in terms of exports. You could effectively divisionalize or unitize the railway line into people who have an interest in running that. And it would run like a toll system, but it would work because people would be happy to pay for it because it works. I think so. There's a lot of other models where you get public-private partnerships where the right investment goes in and the right level of custody, security and monitoring goes in to make sure that the asset really works.
Volker, I don't know if the Minister of Transport or the Energy Minister has been listening to you this afternoon. As South Africa, you talk about the risks that we face. The head of the International Energy Agency, I forget the name now, but was speaking at Davos yesterday at the World Economic Forum, said that not since the international economy industrialized have we seen a power crisis, or an energy crisis rather, of this depth and complexity. I was interested in the use of the word complexity there. Are the problems that we face very different from the problems other countries face?
They're not in principle. So if we use the complexity point, Germany built an entire infrastructure to get gas in from Russia, and now they have to switch that around and get gas by ship. So gas by pipe from Russia becomes gas by ship from Qatar. That's quite a complex problem to solve. The Rhine River that was used for distribution of materials is now being commandeered to ship coal up and down the river. And to make that more complex, they've had less rain, so the river can't carry as much, baggage, ballast. So you've got significant things, and that's the whole point about risk and scenario planning and understanding. In the South African context, the complex is that you can't force feed power into our grid where it doesn't exist. So why not break the problem down into where the grid does exist? And then the complexity only relates to connecting different sources of power to where the grid does exist, which means that you could distribute, for instance, gas turbines. You could distribute mini nuclear power stations or other forms of power generation. And that complexity means that you need to break down power supply into maybe 5 or 10 sub-modules. And getting that through maybe our legal system or regulatory system is a complex issue. But it's all doable. These are all practical things that can be solved.
Volker van Widdern is the head of strategic risk practice at Riskonet Africa. Volker, thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate the time.